So, welcome to episode 2 of the Training Fundamentals series. In this one, we've got rep ranges. More specifically, which rep range should you be training in? Now, we'll start with 1 to 4 reps. What is this good for? It's good for building strength. Not necessarily building muscle, but it's great at priming that central nervous system to lift a ton of weight. Now, this can be for your squat, bench, deadlift, and if you really want to push those numbers, training in the 1 to 4 rep range makes sense. But to equate the volume versus doing 10 plus reps, what's going to happen? You're going to be way more fatigued. It's going to take a massive toll on the body. You're going to have to deload every 4 to 6 weeks to actually recover, and you're not going to see a ton of growth from it. So it's got a high recovery burden, very little in terms of building muscle, but great for building strength. Secondly, we've got that 5 to 10 rep range. Yes, on the 5 to sort of 7 reps, it's a great place to gain strength, but you're also gaining a ton of size. But again, you've got that recovery burden. So if you're just doing 5 reps for every single exercise, you're not going to be able to recover in time. And honestly, you're not going to see the most optimal results. You're going to see a ton of strength gains, a ton of size gains, but it's going to be very taxing. Again, you're going to have to deload often because that body is just going to get beaten up. Now, when you're going closer to 10 reps, also a decent place to gain strength, but this is where the stimulus to fatigue ratio, which means the actual muscle protein breakdown that you're going to get from your workout, it's going to be fantastic for the amount of fatigue that you get. You're not going to be way too fatigued to recover properly, and this is a great place to gain muscle. It's also a great place to learn technique because the sets aren't too long. Let's say you're doing 20, 30 reps in a set. You're going to be in that for 1 minute plus. It's going to be hard to maintain concentration. And if you're a beginner, it's going to be hard to maintain perfect technique. You're just going to be trying to get through it as quickly as possible. Now, when it's 5 to 10 reps, you can think, oh, it's only 5, 10 reps. I can focus on maintaining great positioning. And it's not going to be too long where your concentration is going to slip. So great place to learn technique, great place to build muscle, but it's going to be taxing on the joints. Same with a 1 to 4 rep range. So you are at a higher risk of injury. What else is it great for? It's great for perception of intensity. Most guys, when they're going 15, 20 reps plus, they don't know if they're hitting failure or it's the lactic acid or their cardiovascular system's giving out. With the 5 to 10 rep range, you know it's going to be close to where you think it is. And if you keep consistently adding weight to the bar, eventually it is just going to be to a point where you can't lift any more weight. So you actually know if you're training hard enough. Because perceiving 0 to 3 reps from failure, which is where you build the muscle, if you're up in 25 reps, it's really hard to tell, especially if you're a beginner. So 5 to 10 reps, great place for a beginner to gain strength, to gain size. Next up, we've got that 10 to 20 rep range. Now, this is great for building muscle, harder to perceive intensity. However, if you're someone who's prone to sort of joint pain, maybe you're 40 years plus, this is where we like to stay because it's less taxing on the joints and you're still going to build a ton of muscle. However, you are going to struggle to maintain that focus throughout the entire set if you're a beginner. But it is great for that stimulus to fatigue ratio once again. Far less taxing than 5 to 10 reps. You're still going to gain a decent amount of strength, but yeah, with the downsides that I already mentioned. Now, this becomes even more exacerbated when you get 20 to 30 reps. On paper, anywhere between 5 and 30 reps taken close to failure is going to build you the same amount of muscle. But when you're training 20, 30 reps, the only thing it's really good for is if, again, you're like 40 plus years old, you're prone to injuries, less taxing on the joints. You can go for slow negatives and go in that higher rep range. But it is extremely tough to tell if you're close to failure or it's other factors becoming the limiting factor rather than muscular failure. Adding reps at that point is actually pretty tough too. So 20 to 30 reps, great in theory, you're going to build the same amount of muscle, but in practical terms, your set is going to be going on for so long, it's going to be hard for you to maintain technique. The only time I would use it would be for your isolation movements. So your lateral raises, your curls, just your lighter stuff like your arms, all these isolation movements are going to be good in the sort of 10 to 30 rep range. Your heavy compound lifts, so your squat, your bench, your deadlift, I would recommend if your goal is to build muscle too, we want to stay in that 5 to 10 rep range for the first exercises. So we've got the heavy compound lifts, 5 to 10 reps. Then we can have our secondary movements. So let's say you start a workout on bench press. You do 3 sets of 5, perfect. That way you know how close you are to failure, you can maintain good technique, you can stay tight, you can build a ton of strength. Now if your secondary movement, let's say, is your cable fly, this you can go into higher rep ranges because you don't realistically want to be doing 5 reps on cable fly because it's going to have a massive impact on the joints. You're probably not going to see enough of the pump. You're not going to get enough pump perception, and you're not going to get a great stimulus for growth there. So for the cable flies, you want to be keeping it 8 to 20 rep ranges. That is where you're going to build more muscle. So we've got the heavy compounds suited to the lower end of the rep range. Then you've got your isolation movements that you want to be doing in the higher rep ranges. And they're also more suited in terms of progressive overload to rep increases. So for your rear delt flies, for example, you're not going to be adding weight every single week because eventually it's just going to get too heavy. So what you want to do is add reps. So you want to start around 8 reps and then you want to be building to around that 20 rep mark. And if you can hit that, then you increase in the weight. Whereas something like the bench press, the squat, let's say you're doing 5 reps, you can do that pretty much week to week, adding 2.5 pounds to the bar. That's just the best way to grow in that area and build strength. Also, with something like the squat, the reason it's not suited to 15, 20 reps is because your cardiovascular system is just going to give out way too quick. You're going to be puffing, you're going to be 10 minutes between sets to actually recover. And again, you're not going to know if you actually hit muscular failure or it was another thing becoming the limiting factor. Now, in terms of my overall recommendations, if you're trying to build muscle, we want to stick between, realistically, 6 and 15 reps. That's the most practical rep range to build strength, to build size. Now, if you are someone who does have joint pain, sticking 10 plus reps on all exercises and going all the way up to 25 is going to be great. But for beginners, 6 to 12, great way to learn your form. Sets aren't too long. Great way to know how close you are to failure. And great way to build muscle because if you're a beginner, you're unlikely to have any joint pain to begin with. And if you're working on your form, starting light, then 6 to 12 rep range is going to yield you the best growth for the sort of it's less taxing on the nervous system versus your sort of 1 to 5 rep range. Now, if you want to build purely strength, 1 to 5 is great. Building muscles, 6 to 12, 6 to 15, it's going to be a great range to be in. And if you've got joint pain, going into those higher rep ranges. And remember, heavy compounds are your first exercises in your session. Lower reps are fantastic. Moving on from that, and your isolation movements, so your curls, your push downs, they're more suited to your 10 plus rep range, and you're building reps from there or adding weight to the bar over time. That concludes episode 2.